Right, so here we have the beginnings of a little demo Angular application that shows here some default data that is being sent by the controller, bound to an object in the scope, and is being rendered here as an input field and a text area. And also we have bound this button to a function on the controller so that we can communicate and send events so that the controller can handle those events, right, and do something with the data that we're sending. Right now we're just printing it out to the console. Right? What I'd like to be able to do actually is put it in some array of objects, right, that we can then render. Right? So let's do that. So let's see. What we really like to do here is to put it in some array, right? And let's put it in this array. We'll say scope that posts, right? We'll put it in an array, and presumably that array would have to have an initial empty state, right? We'll say scope.posts empty array. Again, notice that is declared on the scope. Right? So it's declared on an object that will be available on the template, right? On the view. So here on the post, we could just push that brand new post object, right? That is being sent over from the view. Yes. Right? And we could just print out in the console the content of that array, every time we post a new post into the array. Everybody okay? All right. Okay. So let's try this out. So let's go back. Let's refresh, and if we blog post, notice that now, right? It's showing that it's an array of one object. If I post again, it's an array of two objects. So it looks like it's adding it to an array. So this is. Let's just post some bogus data. There it is, 3 objects, 4 objects, and let's inspect these objects. Right? Notice that if we inspect that last object, you would expect that the title and body have 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. But if you inspect the second one, it's something that you would not expect, that it's also 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2, 3, 4, 5, right? They're all 2, 3, 4, 5. What's going on? So what's happening is that Angular treats these objects as if they were instances, right? As a single instance. That object only exists once, the post object, right? That it's tied to that input field into that text area. And there's only one of those, right? And it treats it as if it was a reference object, and so that when it passes it in the function, right, to add post, right, to the controller, it's passing a reference to that object, and the controller is doing what? It's just posting that reference into the array once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, right? Always the same reference back to the same object that it is in the view, right? Okay, it's treating it like a pointer. Right, almost, right? So that you might have in C, C++, right? If you pass a pointer, anybody who has that pointer, right, can manipulate the original data structure. Right? This is not how we expect this to behave, right? So we need to understand a little bit of that as well. So what we really meant for this to happen was that for these to be independent instances of the original original objects, right? So we like to be able to copy, perhaps, right, the original object, and then put that in the array, right? Not the original pointer to the original object. Make sense? All right. So we could make copies in a couple ways. One way would be to create a brand new JSON object from scratch, right? Like this, right? Using a literal a syntax like this, right? And you could say that the title is the same title as the incoming post object, right? And that the body is the body of the post of the incoming object, right? So that's a copy. And then we can include the new post inside of this new post. Okay? But wait a minute. Let me just show you first before I do that. Let's render here. Let's render those blog posts here. That array. Let's render it. Let's not here because it's going to become hard to read. Right under the button. Right. So let's render those posts, right, which is bound to the scope. Right. It's the array that holds all the scopes, all the posts. So let's try that again. Right. So if we try here 1, 2, 3, and then here 1, 2, 3, we say blog post. That's what we would expect, right? It's the array of the title and the body. Right. But remember, the object in here has a reference to this object up here. Right, so whatever I do to this original object happens to the object even in the array. Okay, because the array is rendering a reference to something that it lives on the view. Right? Just be careful here, right? So if I try to change this to 2, 3, 4, right? Everything changes, right? And I insert the blog post. Now everything has 2, 3, 4. Now we have 2 pointers, 2 references to the same object. So if I change this, right, everywhere, right, changes because they're all referencing the same instance, right? If that changes, everybody gets notified and re-renders. You see that? So be careful, right? These are Angular treats these as if they were pointers, like references to the same object. And most of the time, that's what you want, right? Pass references around, right? But like any language that supports pointers, right? You always have to understand if you're passing it by reference or you're passing it by value, right? In languages that don't support it, that it's always passed by value, then there's no point in having to distinguish one or the other. But if you know it's being passed by reference, you need to know, do I really want the reference or do I really want the value? Okay. So what we're dealing here is that we're creating a copy, a brand new copy, and that is what we're going to put in here, a brand new copy, right, into the array. And now it's going to behave hopefully the way we would expect, right? 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. So there it is, right? And if we continue, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, it's a brand new instance, and they don't change when I change 1. Make sense? Everybody okay? All right. Okay, so what's left over is I want to actually render these things, right? Down below. I want to render these things. Let's do that. I want to render this array somewhere. I'm rendering it over here. What I really want to do is render it down below using the template, right? So a developer might come here and look at the template and look at this and says, okay, well, you gave me three values, right? 3 instances of these blog posts. Perhaps you're generating lots of them because you want to see how they render, how it scrolls, right? What if the blog post is too long, too short? What does it render? So you have different versions of big bodies, big titles, big short titles. See how it renders, right? So you've given me several, and presumably the designer has styled it in such a way that it knows how to handle all these things, right? So it's not my concern, right? So the developer, the designer, hopefully has added classes here that handle all these issues. My responsibility is that I'm going to take all this hard-coded content and make it dynamic, right? That's my responsibility. I want to make this li, use that as a template, right? And just copy and paste this over and over and over, right? For each instance of blog posts that I have, right? So somewhere I want to be able to say, repeat the following template for as many posts as there are. Basically, what I want to do, right? And Angular allows us to do just that. Allows you to declare a repeater. Ng repeat. So repeat this template, copy and paste this for every post in posts, right? Where posts is that array, right? It's that array. What this is going to do is going to iterate over that array, right? And it's going to bind each object instance to a local variable post, okay, which I can then reference inside of the scope of the repeater. The repeater has the scope of the opening and closing of the template that it's using. Right? So in this case, it would be li and li down here. It doesn't have a scope outside of the template, the small template that it's using. Right? So this local variable post is a local variable only within the scope of this li. This post here has nothing to do with this post variable up here. Okay, they are completely two different variables. They happen to have the same name, but they have nothing to do with one another. Okay, so now what I can do is instead of this having this lorem ipsum, I'm gonna copy and just put it down here for a second. Okay, we can render that post object. Right, the post object that is right here. Right. So if we rerun this, notice that the array is empty. Right. Actually, let me remove these posts. The array is empty, and notice that there are no posts down below. Right. Notice that template is not being rendered because there are no posts. There's nothing to iterate over, so the li never makes it in there. Right. That line item makes it. If I look at the content, if I inspect the elements down below, I have ul. And it's empty. See that? It's just one empty ul. Even though I did put in an li in there, yes? Right? ng repeat removes it from the DOM because there are no instances, right? But it compiles it and has it ready to be pasted back in and added to the DOM as it finds items in the array. Yes? Okay. All right, so let's do our first blog post. There it is. Notice that the li was added. See that? The li was added. The h3, the original h3 that was there, is being added. The p just has the text, the JSON representation of the object, and that's how it renders. See that? Everybody good? All right. So we could actually, instead of rendering the JSON object, we could, because post is a JSON object, we could render all the different attributes. We want the body down here, and we want the post title up here, right? Which we can then render blog post, and there it is, right? So the title is rendered with h3, and the body is rendered just with a paragraph, right? As we would expect, right? And if we have a brand new one, new post, and this is lorem ipsum here, and we post is down below. There it is, lorem ipsum, right, being posted as a block. Everybody okay? Make sense? All right. Blog post. How about a date? Right, it'd be nice that if this had a date as well. So here we could add a date posted, right, and create a brand new instance of a date object. So that gives us the current date, right, of when this was generated, and on this side we could render it maybe down below, right, as a post.date, right. So if we render, it renders as the string representation of the date, okay, of that date object. We could style it a little bit, or we could use a filter. Right? A filter is a Angular set of filters that you can use out of the box, or you can create your own filters. You can say treat that piece of data, right? Treat it as a date. Right? Date is a standard Angular filter. You can create your own filters. But what we'll try to do is parse whatever's on the left-hand side is being piped to the filter. We'll try to parse it as a date object and format it in its default format. Right, so if I do that, the default format is to use May, then day, and then year, right? Using the Western way of rendering these dates. But you can override it and set your own format. Okay, there's long format, short format. There's lots of different formats. Or you might decide to put this in a separate label. Okay, down below, right? So it renders there. Everybody okay? All right. Okay, so how about being able to do other operations? So up to this point, we've only created 2 of the typical 4 operations that any entity needs, right? Here, our entity, our domain object, right, is the blog post, right? Well, we have 2 domain objects, right? One is the blog, which contains many posts. So there it is. We have a one-to-many relationship, right? And so we have 2 domain objects, and so for every domain object, typically we need at least 4 operations, right? We need to be able to create blog posts. We need to be able to read blog posts. We should be able to update a blog post, and we should be able to remove a blog post, right? Up to this point, we've done 2 of them: create and read. Read a list of posts, right? We might want to be able to read a particular post, right? Maybe we should do that too. So definitely we could read all of them, right? But perhaps we'd like to be able to read one of them. We'll see that in a minute. So those are the typical CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. So we've done create, sort of done read. Let's do a delete, right? It's one of the easier ones. To create a delete, let's add an X or something that we can click and remove that blog post. All right, so let's do that. To do that, let's add a span here, and in that span we're going to use one of several images or glyphs or glyphicons that Bootstrap provides. Right? Bootstrap provides a whole bunch of free images that you can use for contextual actions, right? Like removal, search, like magnifying glass. There's tons of them, and you can take a look at them here. If you go to components, you have a list of a whole bunch of glyphicons, right? That are free for use. I'm going to use this one, glyphicon remove for the X. Yes. Another popular set of glyphicons, they are in the form of fonts. That is very, very popular. Is font awesome, right? If you go there and take a look at the icons, there's quite a few icons listed here, many more, and I encourage you to use font awesome. Later on we'll install this and use this as well. Okay, most of the brands are here, so Amazon, American Express is here, Amazon is here, obviously Google is here, Google Wallet, Google Plus. So all the brands are represented here. So if you want to use any of their glyphicons for free, use Font Awesome, right? Anyway, so I'm going to use this one, and the way you use it is through a span. And why is this not? Oh, there we go. Glyphicon. Thank you. And then glyphicon remove. There it is. Glyphicon remove. So this adds for me an X, or I thought, oh, you know what? I didn't download the entire Bootstrap. Right? I just downloaded the CSS. I didn't download the fonts and all that. Oh. All right, I'll need to install all that. I'll just go with what? Let's see. Instead, I will go with a times. Does that work? There we go. It's a times, right? It's the X. So what I'm going to do, right, is I want that to go on the right-hand side, right? So Bootstrap provides for me some classes that allows me to push stuff to the right, to the left, right? So there's one called pull to the right, and that puts it to the right-hand side, regardless of what the left-hand side says. Right? So if I click on that, what I'd like to be able to do is remove it, right? Remove the blog post. So I can tie this to an ng-click, ng-click, right? Tie it to remove or delete post. And there are two ways that we can do this, right? We can pass an index, right? We know that this is an array, right? It's an array, so we should be able to pass the index of the element that I want to remove, right? And use that index into that array and just splice it out. Let's do that first. So the index we can get a hold, if we're inside of an ng repeat, we can keep track of what element are we in, right? By providing a $index. $index, that $, again, it's a clue that this is a variable that is declared by the infrastructure, by the underlying infrastructure. Okay? And the value is 0, 1, 2, 3 as it iterates over the array. Yes? All right, so on the controller, I need to be ready to handle that event. So let's declare it here. Before we do that, notice that if I start putting all these scopes, delete posts, and put these functions, and put this index, right? This is going to start to become hard to read. Right? It's going to start to become hard to read. I have the event handler. This might be several lines of code, right? And down below I have another event handler, right? And down below I might have another, for update, for find, for sort, for whatever, right? And if I implement it that way, it makes it a little hard to read, right? If I can't answer really quick, what are all the events that this controller handles? To do that, I need to read the entire document, right? Looking for all these functions, yes? And that, this controller could be, 100 lines long or whatever. It could be fairly long, so it might be very inconvenient to do that. So a better way to do this is to instead declare all your event handlers way at the top, right? And bind them to functions that are implemented way at the bottom. Delete post. Okay. Same thing with add post. This would be equal to add post, and the function would be declared towards the bottom. This way, the developer is not forced to read your entire code. If they just want to look at real quick what the event handlers are, right, I will have it nicely declare all at the top, and it says, "Oh, okay, you have an event handler that handles that." If they care to know how it's implemented, they could go, they can keep reading and see the actual implementation. But I'm not forcing them to, okay? And I'll ask you to please follow this convention as you implement the assignments, as you implement your own projects, right? It's a good practice that is widely used in industry, okay? So you declare your variables at the top, you declare any initialization code at the top, and your event handlers towards the top, and the implementation down below. Yes? All right. All right, so delete post. What do we want to do in the delete post? So an index is being passed to us, right? And so we can easily just grab the list of our posts, our array, and basically, again, with an object-oriented mind, right, we're going to just remove the object from that array at that location. And to do that, we have a function splice. So splice is a JavaScript function, right? Again, it behaves differently depending what you pass it, right? The first argument is the same regardless. Where do you want to operate, do the splice? And splice behaves differently depending on the second argument, right? If the second argument is a 0, it's interpreted as an insert. Meaning insert at position index, right, the following elements, right, and then you can have a whole bunch of elements here, okay? But we're not inserting. Instead, we are removing, right, one element at location index. Make sense? Right? This allows you to say how many elements you want to remove starting at a particular index. Everybody okay? All right, and that's the extent of delete, right? Now, typically you would ask, all right, well, you deleted it. Now you deleted the object from the array. What about the view? The DOM still has those elements, right? It might have 10 elements. You removed one of them, and you removed it from model. What happens to the view, right? And so if you're following what's been happening, hopefully you would guess correctly that, right? If you have these two, and you just remove one of them, it's just simply gone. Right? There was no need for me to re-render the view. Right? Again, it's all object-oriented. Whatever happens to the object, right? The view gets notified, and it says, "Ooh, I need to re-update myself." Right? The ng repeat needs to re-update itself. Now, it might seem that it might be too expensive because, say, you have hundreds of these things, right? And you remove one of them, and says, "Oh, well, I need to re-render 99 of them." Well, that's not the case, right? Angular keeps track of what object was used to render what template, right? It keeps track that this object instance was used to render this div, this element in the DOM, right? So that if this object is removed, right, and it no longer exists, well, then that portion of the template gets removed. Not the whole thing gets re-rendered. Okay, so there is a lot of optimization in there, right? If this was a server-side application using PHP or JSP or any other server-side, not only, I mean, you would have to go to the server. The server would remove that particular object, and the entire page gets re-rendered, right? Not just 99 of the original 100 elements gets re-rendered. The entire page gets re-rendered, which is a unnecessary use of resources, right? Here is very optimal, right? The particular object gets mapped to a particular template, right? And there's a one-to-one mapping, and it gets removed. Make sense? And that's great up until you start using other libraries that also want to operate on the DOM, like Jquery. Jquery also wants to. It's a very powerful library that allows you to manipulate the DOM. Yes, but they don't work well together, Jquery and Angular, right? They because they're competing for the same DOM, right? And Angular wants to make sure that this object representation maps to this template that is rendered on the view, and it has a very one-to-one mapping between the two things, right? It doesn't like that somebody comes around and starts mocking around with its DOM, right? And adding things or removing things or moving things around, right? And making the object representation, right, not synced what it's being rendered, right? So we'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, that's the only extent of a title. Let's add just a whole bunch of these just to give you a sense. So here's 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. So we have these, right? If I remove 1, 2, 3, right, it just becomes, then you get just 2, 3, 4. Or if you remove the top one, you just get 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5. Right? It's just as easy as that. Everybody good? Okay. All right. All right. So we have delete. We have create. We sort of have read. Where we have half of it. We can read all of them, but we can't read one of them, right? And we don't have update, right? So let's work on those. Let's work on editing one of these, updating, right? Because to be able to update, we might need also to be able to read or fetch one of these elements, right? One of them, so that you can then edit it, right? So let's do that. Let's work on that. Let's add here another span. Span class pull right also, and let's see an entity. Let's see. Do I have check mark? Check mark. There it is. Check mark. And let's see. What does that look like? There's my check mark. Right. So let's or wait. Do I have pencil? Pen? No. So check mark. Let's do check mark. So I'll use that check mark as being able to select it, right? Because I want to edit it. right? And then what we'll do is that we'll fetch it from the model, we'll copy this onto our form, yes, so that we can edit it, right? I don't know, does Facebook allow you to edit your posts? Yeah, it does, right? Yeah. All right, so let's do that. Let's do an ng-click. Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. Let's do ng-click. Let's see, ng-click, and this will be select post. Select post, all right? And again, we could use an index and says that is the post that we want to edit, okay? And let's do that. And so if we go back to the controller, we can listen for that incoming event handler. So we say scope dot select post. So this will be select post, right? Implemented in a function of the same name, select post. And this will be the index. All right. So what we want to do is we want to copy that post onto our form so that we can edit it, right? So what we could do is grab from the array scope.posts sub-index, right? And that we can put it into that form. So we can say scope.post is equal to that, right? So we're gonna populate the post object, right? This post object right here that has post.title and post.body, right? And it might behave a little bit weird, okay? Because what are we doing there? Right, that's an object that lives at some memory space, right? And we are setting it to this, right? And when we start editing the post, what's going to happen? Let's see. So let's click on it. Let's add a post. Right, let's add another one. Blog post. So there's these two. So let's select this. So if we select this, notice that it copies the content to the form. Yes. But as I type, see what's happening? Right there, because it's as a reference, right? You're setting the reference of an object that lives in an array, right? And you're setting it to this other object, which now is also pointing to the same thing, right? So whatever you do to one happens to the other. Well, no, actually, right? There's no two. It's one, right? They're pointing to the same reference, right? It's the same two references pointing to the same instance. Okay, this might be okay. Maybe this is what you want. I imagine that is not what you want. What you might want to do is copy the same way we did earlier. Yes, we could do something like this, right? We could do, we could copy just like we did earlier, right? And set the title and the body and whatnot. Yes, okay. Or we can copy using one of Angular's mechanisms, right? We can say angular dot copy, right? And this does a deep copy, right? So if this object contains other objects, it will traverse the tree, right? It'll copy the entire object and then give you a copy of it, right? So now, right? If I select it, right, and I type on it, nothing happens, right? And I post. Notice that it has no idea that it has anything to do with that object that was selected. So somewhere we need to remember, what is the object that you had selected? Somewhere we need to remember that, right? So let's remember which index it is that you chose, right? So scope index, right? Let's store it there, index, right? Let's store it there so that if you say update, let's put another button, right? Call update blog, right? You will call and say update post, and we'll send the post object. This post object is going to remember, right, what was the index of the object that you had originally modified, and it'll replace whatever is in there now. Okay, so let's do that. So update post. Let's create an event handler for that. So scope dot update post. Okay. All right, and so this would use a function called update post, which receives the post object, and is going to update the scope post at what location? At the location of the index that we had stored earlier, right? So it'll be scope index, and that is going to be a copy of that post that comes in through there. I don't want a reference to it, right? I want a copy of it. So let's try to do that. Let's see. So let's let's change the color of the update. Maybe make it green, which in Western culture, success is green. I don't know if it has to do anything with the dollar. So blog post, there it is. So we added the blog post, and we have 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3 blog post, and 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So there they are. So let's edit this one, and we can change this to be some new title, and update the blog post. Notice that it changes, right, after we have set it. All right? Everybody okay? Right. So up to this point, this has all happened on the client, right? Notice that the blog post is there, right? If I refresh, it's all gone, right? This was only ever happening at the session, that particular session of the browser, right? There is no, everything is being manipulating the DOM, right? And once you refresh the page, you get a brand new original DOM for the original index page, right? Which didn't contain any of those changes, right? So all this was happening at the client. The server had absolutely no idea this was going on. All right. So for this to be able to survive more than one session, we need to introduce server-side programming. Right. So let's do that now.